had a fellow who criticized my science series, and I'm addressing some of the issues he raised, okay, one by one, and I addressed a couple of them already. Today I'm going to be addressing a third segment here, something this fellow said. So let's just roll on, see what this fellow had to say. Give me a second here so that I can turn this on. Here it goes. Listen carefully. The questions and issues addressed in this rebuttal are: is science an ongoing process? Is the problem in science today that the mathematicians don't yet have all the answers?
You know, the wording there is quite important. It says we don't know the complete answers to these questions. And that is why science is an ongoing process, because, yeah, we have some of the answers, but we don't have all of the answers.
Okay, I'll address first the second part, okay? Whether we have all the answers, okay? And that'll lead probably to a reply, an answer to the first one. The issue is, whether we have any answers today. And the answer I can give you is that we have no answers today from the mathematical establishment. Okay, what kind of answers are people looking for, or some of the answers that people are looking for that have not been addressed in 2,500 years, at least since the days of the Greeks? And here are just a rundown on that so that you can see what I'm talking about, okay? We have not a single answer. Do we know what gravity is? What causes gravity? Here I always do my famous experiment, okay? Let me get the pencil here. We let go of the pencil, and it falls down. And you see nothing here, and you see nothing here. You touch nothing here, nothing here other than air, right? Which is not claimed to be a cause of gravity, okay? So we let go of the pencil, and it falls to the ground. Nobody can tell you what causes that to happen. 2,500 years. No one can tell you what causes that to go down. And I addressed that the other day. This all thinks it's space-time. And the first thing there is that, space-time works out there. Space-time, in other words, the general relativity theory, which is not a theory, it's just a mathematical description, has to do with giant masses. It doesn't have to do with warp space being, space being warped down here at this level. A lot of people don't understand that. Okay, that's one issue. But here, what is the explanation? Well, here it is. Okay, this is from Brian Greene. Okay, this is, so you can look it up. Okay, it's not me putting this, raising strawman or whatever. Here it is. This is the mechanism why the moon doesn't fly out of the solar system, why it doesn't fly out of the Earth orbit. Okay, so is this the mechanism? We're saying there's a warped canvas there, meaning warped time, because that's what that canvas is. Those lines there, they represent time. One of those, okay? One of those lines. So we have warped time, and here's the mechanism they propose. I've shown this the other day, okay? Is that what we have? We have warp time. Is that what's preventing the moon from flying out or the Earth from flying out of the solar system? A curved wall of time? It's the roulette mechanism. And so this is what we have today. And what can you say? Are you going to believe that this is what causes gravity? So this is an irrationality mainly because they're doing it with concepts. This is not a physical description or even mechanism explanation for why the Earth or the moon don't fly out of the solar system, or for that matter, any other planets, asteroids, and whatever. Why do they all revolve around the sun? What keeps them there? What is the centripetal force that pulls them towards the sun while the thing is trying to orbit and get out of the sun's orbit? Okay, so this is the issue. The issue is that they have no explanation for gravity. How about magnetism? I covered that the other day as well. You can look it up in more detail than today. Okay, and here you have a magnet, and it's in the water, and you can see that the magnet is pulling one iron filing at a time towards it. So in that region called a field, magnetic field, as Mr. Faraday and Mr. James Maxwell both said, that in that region you have matter in motion. They cannot conceive of, that region being without some kind of exotic matter. And there's something in motion in there, so because you can see it's pulling one magnet, one iron filing at a time. So how do you explain this? And, again, what they say is that the domains are aligned. That's one of the answers they give you. Domains are aligned, as I discussed the other day. The other one that they say is that the electrons are spinning clockwise or counterclockwise. So what? So they're spinning clockwise, counterclockwise, the domains are aligned. How does that, in any way, shape or form, pull on one of those iron filings right through the water towards the skin of the magnet? That's what you got to explain. So we have no explanation for magnetism. and none for gravity. How about electricity? Are we doing any better with electricity? Does anybody on planet except us here understand how electricity works? Okay, let's find out. Here, this is electricity according to the establishment. Here you see it. Okay, you have a circuit on the left. Okay, and they say it's the rolling of beads from atom to atom. And there you see it on the upper right. The big atom blues are the atoms. The red ones are the electron beads. And what we're doing here is simulating with hydrogen atoms essentially. And what they're saying is that what electricity is simply the flow of electron beads from atom to atom. And that's essentially the model also used by Albert Einstein, essentially, to explain the photoelectric effect. They said there's these charges and that are being hit by photons during the photoelectric effect, and that's what electricity is. So everybody agrees that this is what electricity is. This is how the electric universe also explains electricity, the flow of charges, as they call it. And the problem with all this is that atom on the bottom right. If you are going to explain ionization, if you're going to explain quantum jump, if you're going to explain electricity, you're using that planetary atom that you see on the bottom right. Okay, and so the only issue there that the person has to explain is why doesn't the electron bead fall to the nucleus, which was what actually, triggered the investigation of the atom at the beginning of the 20th century. People wanted to know why doesn't the electron fall to the nucleus? And to this day, we have no explanation for that. And I'll add another one, and that is why doesn't the electron fly out of the atom spontaneously? What keeps it bound to the proton or the nucleus or whatever? So this is the issue. We have no explanation for the atom. And if you don't have an explanation for the atom, meaning you don't have an atom to explain electricity, then you don't have electricity. You do not understand electricity. It's just as simple as that. Okay, so, we have no understanding. Mathematicians don't have any understanding of electricity. How about light? Are we doing any better with light? Well, this is what you see for light out there. You see what? Waves and particles. What are waves? Well, they're a bunch of vectors that are moving. Very scary stuff. You have these vectors, which are magnitude and direction, and they're shown as moving through space. Okay, so all we have is a number that apparently is pointing. I don't know how numbers point, but this is what they're saying, that we have values that are pointing in some direction, and these values that are pointing are moving sideways. Absolutely scary stuff. And then particles, well, we cannot explain with particles why light has wave properties. For example, why that particle is supposed to go up and down. And if it goes up and down, what takes it up, what brings it down? So, we can't mimic, we cannot simulate light with particles or with waves. Both are dead in the water. And so what they did was, essentially they said, we're going to build the new model, which is the wave packet. Okay, what is that? Well, they try to blend the wave with a particle. And so they said travels as a wave and arrives and departs as a particle. And that's more or less the description they have for the wave packet, and that's what they use. Can you illustrate a wave packet for me? Absolutely not. Roger Penrose, in his book, one of his books, he put a corkscrew. And that's a professional mathematician who just won a Nobel Prize, okay? Yeah. So science is not an ongoing process at all. We just have to answer these questions. That's what a physicist has to answer. Simply required to explain mechanism, specifically action at a distance. You have, get this out of here. You have two balls. Let me get them here. Here you have two balls. This is all you have to explain, okay? This is the only issue remaining, and then we can all become extinct because we have no more to investigate in physics. Physics with this goes at a dead end. It's the end of physics. And that is two particles. You don't like particles, you like planets? Two planets, or the Earth and the Moon, or the Sun and the Earth, or whatever you want. Doesn't matter. All you have to explain is action at a distance. Okay? So, in magnets as well. If you say this is one magnet, this is another magnet, how does this one affect that one? That's all you got to explain. That's the only issue remaining. It's the only issue that no one has been able to explain in 2,500 years. Once we explain that, the mechanism, we're done with physics forever. There is no more physics after that. Okay, so let me repeat that. Two planets, two particles, two magnets, any one that you want to select. I don't care. You have to explain. Okay, this is it. This is the $1,000,000 question, worth 2 beers. Okay, how does this one affect this one without any mediator? Okay, and if you don't put a mediator, you're using black magic. Therefore, you had better put a mediator, make it visible for us, just so that we can understand the mechanism. Doesn't mean we're going to believe in your theory, but you better put some kind of mediator from here to there. Otherwise, you're doing black magic. So if you're going to do entanglement, and you're going to say that this particle instantly affects this one, like rotating in the same direction, one rotates opposite direction, I'm sorry, one rotating clockwise, the other one rotating counterclockwise. This one affects this one instantaneously, irrespective of distance. Then you one here, one atom here, the other one in the Andromeda galaxy, 2.5 million light years away. That's a measure of distance. Okay, traveling at the speed of light, 2.5 million years. That's what it would take to get to Andromeda. And these people are saying that when this one moves clockwise, this one moves automatically counterclockwise. And there's nothing in between them. And here you have one planet and another planet. And it turns out the moon, or for example, the moon and the Earth, right? And the moon affects the tides of Earth, and the Earth affects the moon because it's not allowed to leave the solar system. How does it do it instantaneously? How does it do it at all? I mean, any way you want to explain it, but hopefully there's something that extends from the Earth to the moon, from the moon to the Earth. And magnet, the same thing. You have magnet attracting magnet. Hopefully you put some physical object in between there. Otherwise, you're doing black magic. Okay, so that's the whole issue with science and with physics. If you cannot explain that, you have not explained physics. And that's one of the issues that the only issue really, ultimately, that the mathematicians cannot explain, have never explained, and will never explain if they attempt to do it through equations. And they can run all the experiments they want. They're never going to figure out what invisible, intangible entity mediates the transaction. And I don't know if I got through to you with all that, but that's what you gotta solve. Otherwise, you don't get the 2 beers. Okay. What else do we have here? Yeah, this is just a punchline on that, or the ending. I say that, you have to tell this fellow who believes in all this stuff, he thinks we're doing fine with science. We have to define science, and we cannot use, what we've had in the past, because none of those definitions give us answers to these questions. They cannot tell us anything about gravity. They cannot tell us anything about magnetism, light, electricity, the workings of the atom, or even the structure of the atom. None of these definitions that we have today of science, from the 17th century, that's what we inherited, specifically experiments, right? And math, obviously, but math already came from the Greeks. What was new was experiments. And if you have an intangible, invisible entity, what experiment are you going to run in the lab to detect it, to elucidate, its architectural or structural nature? There is none. You're just wasting your time. So we have to redefine actually science, rational explanations. That's what science is. What is physics? Rational explanations of causes underlying mechanism. I spelled underlying in reverse. Hope you catch that. Okay. Math cannot help decipher, causes and mechanism. You can't do it with math. And math is just exclusively descriptions. That's all that math is good for. Math is a language that can only describe. It has no power, no authority, no wherewithal to explain, okay? A mechanism. Experiments also cannot disclose invisible, intangible mediators. So there's no purpose for you going to the lab and saying, I'm going to run an experiment. I'm going to verify with an experiment. What are you going to verify with an experiment? Here's the experiment, the only experiment you ever needed. We let go of the pencil. Watch, it's very dangerous, very expensive, okay? We let go of the pencil, and it falls down. Now all you have to do is explain why, the cause, the mechanism. What good is an equation? What good is running another experiment? You want me to do it again, another experiment? Okay, let's do it again. And that's the only experiment you ever needed for gravity. So no, you're not going to elucidate the invisible, intangible entity by running experiments or doing math. That's why math and experiments are not part of the scientific method, okay? Because they've never helped us in the last 400 years. And therefore, neither math or experiments are part of the scientific method as it relates to physics, okay? Causes and mechanisms. Once we figure out action at a distance, discover the invisible, intangible mediators, we are done with physics. We're through. We're finished. We're done. There's no more physics after that because now we understand how the universe works. The only part we cannot explain is action at a distance. People in general can understand, one object hitting another one. This we can understand. Push, more or less. We don't know how this guy moved over there, but we don't care. We can understand push because that's more or less self-explanatory. You visualize, say, okay, surface to surface, this one push, that one. We understand push. What no one understands is pull, because for pull, you need to put in mediator, okay? And if you don't put a mediator, you're doing black magic. That's how simple it is. Okay, so a fellow criticizes, put a comment on that to me or thereabouts. He says, "You got to be kidding. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in science we got thanks to math." Enough said. Yeah, math cannot answer those questions. So this fellow hasn't, been around long enough. That's the only problem. He just parrots the establishment. He doesn't understand what the issues are. No, math cannot tell us anything about the cause of gravity, the mechanism of gravity, the invisible mediator of gravity. For that, you cannot use any math whatsoever. You just got to look back, think, and visualize. That's the only way. Okay, and so this is what we say: is there a rational way to do science? I presented this the other day. Yeah, there is. You have to propose the right approach, okay? And you must ask, what is it that the scientific method is attempting to achieve? What is its purpose, in the context of physics? And the answer cannot rely on tradition, democracy, voting for, definition, or what's the other one? Authority. You cannot rely on that. You cannot say, well, we've always done it this way, and this is what my teacher told me, and no, none of that. You have to define it in a way that you can defend your definition of science as it relates to physics. Okay, so this is not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of, can you defend your theory? Okay, and yeah, we're saying that science to this date, what we've been doing for the last 400 years, especially what we've been doing the last 150 years, is completely irrational. The explanations are all completely irrational. Not one of them survives rationality. Why? Why are they irrational? Because they are in the process, they're in the habit or in the practice of moving concepts around. They explain everything with concepts. They introduce a concept such as energy or field or wave or plasma or any of those, which are abstract concepts. And it takes a mathematician to understand, 2 years at least, to understand why those are concepts and not physical objects. Okay. No, I didn't miss any word. I didn't put one in there by mistake. None of those are objects. Time is not an object. Ether is not an object. Energy is not an object. Field, force, none of those words, charge, none of those words that the mathematicians use qualify as objects in physics. So you cannot do physics, you cannot do physical interpretations with those abstract mathematical concepts, which is what the mathematicians do.